there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Hey, everybody. My name is Scarlett Lewis. Welcome to the Choose Love podcast. I'm so happy to have Dr. Holmes with us today, Dr. Heather Holmes. She is a forensic psychologist who conducts psychological evaluations for state and federal courts. Really, we're going to have an incredible conversation today. Heather was working on Nikolas Cruz's case. And if you don't recognize the name, unfortunately, he was the Parkland shooter on February 14th, 2018. Nikolas Cruz went back onto the high school property that he had. He was forbidden. He was actually expelled previously, and he walked back onto the property and he murdered 14 students and 3 educators. Is that the correct number, Heather?
Yes. There were also a number of people that were shot that were not, that did not pass away, as well as obviously hundreds of traumatized students.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, many people that were injured. And then, of course, we know the trauma that ensues throughout the entire school, and not just the school, but the community as well. It's horrific. It's awful. And you know, I really want to bring our conversation forward, Heather, because I think it's really important that we understand why these things happen. This has been my goal for the last 12 years. To talk to experts and professionals and even school shooters themselves. As you understand, I've had conversations with Nikolas Cruz as well to ask the question I don't think anybody's asking them. How did we fail you? You know, you were a child that clearly did not get their needs met. And so what could we have done? I mean, these are the questions that go through my mind. We haven't figured it out yet. So how do we figure it out? We need to, because our children are our responsibility. We can and need to keep them safe. They're actually, I think, losing confidence in our ability to do that. And so, you know, that's the conversation that I want to have with you today, Heather. And thank you so much for willing to be a part of it.
Sure. And I can tell you, Nikolas Cruz is a little bit different than other defendants and inmates that I've interviewed. He had a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is neurological. It's something that happens before you're born. It's something you don't have control over. It's not like depression or something that comes about during the lifespan. It's something that you are born with and don't have a say in. So he's definitely different, because I would say the vast majority of individuals that I evaluate have had a really large history of childhood trauma. And I think that's what's sad. And we reap what we sow. And so unfortunately, when you have children that are being missed in the system for whatever reason, either the system's overwhelmed or, you know, they don't have anybody advocating for them. You know, there's a multitude and plethora of reasons. It's just sad, because then when we see what we've got, we're stuck with the actions, the anger, and the aftermath of Sorry, there is a house cat trying to make his way. I'm sorry.
Uh,
But so Nick was different. I'm not saying that he didn't go through a lot of things that were difficult for him, but really the unfortunate and the large contributing factor for this young man was his biological mother's alcohol use during pregnancy.
Yeah, I mean, I actually saw a brain scan, and like a normal brain looks like this. And for those of you who aren't watching this on video, I'm just holding up my fist, it's just kind of a ball, but his looked like this. And it was like, wow. I mean, this is my open hand. It's just a lot of different. I don't know how his brain was wiring and firing. It wasn't like most of ours. Heather, could you go over like a little bit of your background and how you came to do what you do and why you do it?
So, sure. I fell into this by accident. I went away to college and wanted to be a lawyer. And I decided I would major in English writing and in political science because I was going to do international business law. But when you're 17 and you don't really have any, I guess, awareness of yourself, I am not good at business. So this would have been a catastrophe.
I resonate
And
with that, by the way.
pardon me?
I resonate that when I was
Yeah.
17, and I was in college, even like no idea, but
Nobody, yeah, it's just unfortunate. But so I was in political science and it was boring and I didn't like it. And so I dropped it, but I didn't have a backup plan. But I also didn't want to be a writing major or a writer. I wanted to do something different. And so I ended up adding psychology because psychology it was in the College of Liberal Arts. So I was only adding a small amount of time and then I could graduate. So it was a very practical decision. And then I worked, actually, it was the first client I ever met that had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I was working with my degree in psychology, which really makes you qualified to do nothing. You are qualified to do nothing. So I was an in-home intensive case management person in a very small town in West Virginia for a foster care agency. And that was the first time and one of the few times I had encountered someone with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And it was a 12-year-old girl. And I just remember we were taught to basket hold and we were taught, and I'm thinking, I mean, I'm 5'3". I'm thinking I'm not basket holding anybody with any success. And she got out.
and basket holding is a physical restraint.
It's a physical restraint that's considered safe to do for children. And, I'm 21. I don't know anything about anything, but she was my client. She ran out of her house and went into the main road, which is where a lot of truckers come, and it's around a mountain corner. And she was freaking out. And I had to basket hold this child. And she was my size. She was angry. She was just in a state. And all I could think was, oh my goodness, we're going to get run over and I don't get paid enough to do this. Is horrible. This was such a horrible feeling. And she turned out safe and everything was fine, but it propelled me to apply for grad school because I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. It was very hard. It was very depressing. It was so sad. So I ended up applying for a master's degree in psychology. I got that when I was at Loyola College of Maryland in Baltimore. And I needed to do an externship. And somebody said, you should do it with this lovely man, Dr. David Shapiro. And he's the best supervisor I've ever had. He just happens to be at a prison. And I said, okay. And so I showed up at 23 at a Supermax in Baltimore. And I'm not going to lie, I fell in love, perhaps with the oddity of it. You see things nobody will ever see.
Such as?
You see people smear feces. You see people, I mean, you'll walk past and there's blood and clearly human tissue and you don't know what happened there. Obviously it wasn't good. You see violence. You see also moments of grace and kindness, not just between inmates to each other, but between officers and inmates too. So it's almost like a voyeur's delight, like a surgeon, except you get to see behavior in that way. And so it was really fascinating, mesmerizing. It was very interesting. And my supervisor was fantastic. So I learned so much. And he was this brilliant man that chose to work for probably peanuts. And he loved it. And here we go. And I'm sorry.
Oh no, we love that. No, we just had an orange and white cat pass.
Oh,
That's
he's
great.
nuts. I found him in the pantry licking
Oh,
vinegar the other day. I was like, this is awful.
that's
Sorry.
fun. That's fun. That's fun. I have to say that that was a calling for you because the first thing you said was, I fell in love with it. And then you started to describe things that people are probably listening to going, oh my God, that's a horror show. And so that is a calling for you because not everybody is fascinated by that. I happen to understand what you're saying because I do think with my work in prisons, not at all to the extent of yours, obviously, but is I don't know. I do see. I guess I see the opportunity for for helping, and the maybe the desperate want for some of them to have love and to learn and to grow. And the I love my favorite thing, Heather, is like sharing Choose Love with them and then watching the eyes register as they realize I had a choice and like love is available to them and they never knew it. And so that's my favorite and even Shannon Desolets, who you met too, who's in
Mhm.
charge of our prison program, like that's her favorite part of Choose Love is working in the prisons, and it does take a special person.
It's interesting, and everybody thinks that the difficult part of working or interfacing or going into prisons is the inmates, and that's actually not the case. And yes, I mean you have difficult personalities and you have all sorts of things, but really the difficult part for me, and I worked full time in a prison for a year and then morphed onto my own to where now I just go in and out. But the difficult thing for me was the bureaucracy. Um, when I worked at the Florida Department of Prisons, I wasn't making a lot of money and I didn't want to sit in traffic and my shift or, it ended at 5. So I stayed later to do paperwork. Well, I got in trouble because you're not allowed to be there but at any other time between 8 and 5. And it's just the rigidity in terms of government and some of the just nonsense that is really difficult. Like you go evaluate somebody, but it's unfortunately there's a time limit, and then if you need just like 10 more minutes because you're in the middle of testing and they're like, sorry, come back again, and you took a plane and drove 3 hours, like it's
Gosh.
that level of rigidity. So it's interesting, but everybody thinks the difficult part is the inmates. It's not. It's really just the whole setup and how strict and limiting things can be.
It's like that's a loss of humanity when you have to work that way.
It's not easy, and it prevents or presents tremendous challenges. Like you can't bring a bottle of water in. There were times I couldn't get into certain facilities if I'm in an underwire bra. And at the time, like I was pregnant, and I remember going, I'm sorry. And I've taken a plane and rented a car and driven,
Right.
and they're just like saying, you can't come in. So the difficult part really is all of the things that are not really related to the actual clinical work of interviewing somebody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I want to talk about what you've learned. I mean, it's like, and more specifically, not just how people get into prison, but more specifically, like we have school shootings that are normal now. Like we expect that kids are going to shoot each other and kill each other, and it's so mind blowing to me that we're at this point where it is our normal, not our new normal. And so why, you're also a mitigation specialist, which I had never heard of before. And now I know that you study generationally how somebody gets to be who they are, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And you're really going to the root cause of why somebody behaves that way. And I believe that we can't get ahead of this problem until we address the root cause. And so I want to ask you, on many levels, like, what do you think the root cause is with the work that you've done? And then also, we'll get in later to what you believe the solutions are.
So, well, technically, I'm not a mitigation specialist, but I do help. So, Kate O'Shea was our mitigation specialist. I do help.
I just saw the word mitigation. You have that in your.
Oh, yes, I do.
You help with the mitigation, with the
correct.
mitigation efforts. And by the way, we have an incredible podcast with Kate O'Shea, who is now a dear friend of mine, and she was the mitigation expert
Yes.
on the Nicholas Cruz trial. And so I encourage everybody, if you're interested in this, to go listen to that Choose Love podcast with Kate O'Shea as well.
She's brilliant. She's lovely. She is an incredible pleasure to work with. She's ethical, has great boundaries, is knowledgeable. She's kind. Like, she's really great. So it's a pleasure when I get to work with her at all. But what I would say is that there are, I think, there's not just one root cause. If I had to pick something, I would say what I see the most of for individuals that really just feel like they have no option is trauma, and their own suffering. So the people that tend to commit these atrocities are young, and what we know about juvenile brain development is it's not done in terms of developing executive functioning until you are about 25, 26. That's why somebody who is majoring in pre-med and they're going to Harvard can still, you read and you're like, how'd they get alcohol poisoning? Like, these people can add, right? They're smart. It's not about IQ. It's about the inability in the moment to weigh consequences, the inability to think ahead, the inability to rein in your impulsiveness. And so we know this now through the development of brain imaging, but anybody who's had a teenager is well aware that their car insurance is through the roof. Anybody that's tried to have somebody rent a car prior to age 25 knows that most places won't. And if they do, you're paying an exorbitant deposit. So private industry was very well aware that this is an impulse-taking, bad decision-making age group.
Yeah.
And, they know that from number crunching and fiscal realities. And now we know there is a biological reason for that. So I do think some of what we see with that age group is an impulsivity. And I'm not saying there's times when it's not planned, but I think there's a combination of somebody suffering. And you could tell this to any police officer. There is a very fine line between homicide and suicide. When you're angry at yourself, it can spin on a dime and you can be angry at others as well. And you see this in a lot of these murder-suicides that, unfortunately, our law enforcement has to deal with when they walk into a home. So, you have younger people, they don't feel understood by adults in their life. And I think that that's kind of natural, whether you're suffering or not. You think your parents know nothing, you think adults know nothing. And there's a lot more, I think, pressure nowadays because it's, the enemy of self-esteem is comparing and contrasting. And when you have at your fingertips something that will show you other people who have a better life, or at least paint that picture of having a better life on social media, it's going to serve a purpose of making you feel bad about you if your self-esteem is already teetering. And, during identity development and teenagers, they're taking a hit in terms of identity and self-esteem. They try on different hats. One day they're goth. The other time they try out for theater. Then they might be, then they might be, playing an instrument or going out for a sports team. There's a lot of things that they try in order to land at where they're going to eventually land. And so there's not that solidness there that hasn't been developed yet. And so I think it makes you more susceptible to feeling sad, to feeling not as good as. And then you've got ready access to people who are posting things that maybe aren't even accurate, but that are showing them in a positive light, and all you do is compare and contrast. So I think that there's a combination of things, but unfortunately, I think some of the uptip, and again, I'm certainly not crunching numbers or data, I'm just by what I've seen, there's just a lot of feeling really poorly about yourself. You don't get your self-esteem nowadays just from your family unit. You get it from what you see on the outside. And, we have no boundary with that. You can view a day in the life of somebody in a completely different country, whereas eons ago, you'd have to go to the library and you'd have to look it up and you'd have to see still images. So I think it leaves a lot of room for our young kids to feel negatively about themselves.
I agree. I mean, I usually say that with all of my conversations that I've had with school shooters, that if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be that they don't feel seen. That's what
Yes.
I've taken away from my conversations. And that is so important. You don't get seen for who you really are on social media. You don't get seen for who you really are unless, actually, in my opinion, someone's looking in your eyes and you get that mirror neuron activity, and they are seeing beyond, by the way, the mask that we wear for the most part, especially kids when they're going into school, the whatever clothing, whatever outfit you choose, or whatever, as you said, goth, or, like Nicholas was explaining to me, he wore dark hoodies with the hood up because he didn't feel worthy of being seen, although he was desperate to be seen. And I think about Aaron Stark, who, has that TED talk, I was almost a school shooter. And he was saying that, the fix is being able to give love to those we feel deserve it the least. And that takes a lot of courage. So I think you're right. And I think as you were talking too, I had my mom's voice in the back of my head because you were saying, suffering, trauma, impulsiveness, lack of decision-making skills, inability to weigh consequences, not feeling understood, having low self-esteem and suffering. But she would say, lots of kids feel that. Lots of kids feel that.
They do.
So why does someone choose to pick up a gun, whereas someone else wouldn't?
So when you say lack of being seen, nothing makes you more visible than doing something that is so horrifyingly newsworthy. It's was it Andy Warhol that said everybody gets 15 minutes of fame? It's almost as if you see the attention, and again, I don't fault media for reporting the news, but it's like you see others getting a lot of airtime, a lot of attention, albeit negative.
Doesn't matter.
For do it correct. Attention is attention. And
by the way, attention, I heard this somewhere and it really resonated with me. Attention is the purest form of love. And so if you're not getting attention as a child or an adult, probably in a good way, then you'll get it in a bad way. Then you'll get it from acting out.
Well, and for instance, one of the first questions Nicholas Cruz had for me was, the attorney said you used to work in prison. Can I get a girlfriend in prison? And all I could think was, that's your biggest concern? And obviously he's got something going on neurologically. So this is, he's different in that manner, but he talked all the time about wanting a girlfriend. He absolutely, that was like his goal. And it's just so sad. I mean, obviously, for many reasons, but when you have somebody that feels a little bit different, I think that they perceive others as being better than or higher functioning than them. And I remember having this conversation with my daughter. It's, oh, you don't feel cool? All of those other girls that are following the mainstream appear that they feel that way. But I guarantee you, you're in middle school, nobody feels like that.
Yeah.
Everybody feels like crap. Everybody thinks they don't fit in. Everybody's growing into their changing body. Everybody's moods are all over the place because of hormones. Like nobody feels just like they own it and they're 100% in their skin, but they don't talk about it.
I mean, that's adults too, by the way.
Yes.
Come
Yes.
on. I want to say that, but I don't want to, like, maybe not in front of the teachers when I'm talking to middle schoolers, but I want to say, hey, we're all in the same boat here. The issues that you guys are having now, we struggle with as well. We need to
Yes. I
do
mean,
another podcast on that.
well, for instance, this morning I had a fender bender and it was 110% my fault. And I literally was like, the things I was saying to myself in my head were, you're so stupid. Why didn't you look at that? What is wrong with you? And did I make a mistake? 110%. Is it my fault? Yes. But it's that dialogue in my head that I caught myself saying, and I was like, this needs to stop.
Right.
Like you're a person, you made a mistake, nobody's injured. Like it's completely fine.
Yes. Yeah.
So, it's so I think adults do it as well. But when it comes um, to adolescents, they also have a tendency to feel things more intensely. That's biologically part of it. They feel joy more intensely. They feel sadness more intensely, and it's really about thinking you're alone, assuming everybody else feels and looks better than you.
You're the only person that feels that or that's going through that thing in the whole world. You're
100%.
isolated.
Yes.
That's a feeling. It's only a feeling.
And, and social media does serve to isolate, right? Because if I wanted to see my friends when I was growing up, I would have to physically go see them. I couldn't, there was no FaceTime, there was no social media, there was none of that.
Right.
And if that phone rang at my house past 9 p.m., my dad would flip his lid. So, this 24-hour access by not even having to leave your room, I think, despite it opening up worlds for kids, and it was great during COVID, it stuck and it has become an unfortunate replacement for in-person human contact.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose
I believe it's got to be, and there may be research on this. You can Zoom with a friend, but you can't be getting the same chemical neurological response as if you're in person looking into their eyes like we are designed to do and making
Yes.
that really close connection. It cannot be replaced. And I do think that that's a problem, but I want to back up and go back to, okay, so our kids are in pain. I work in schools and I see it, and it is not decreasing, it is increasing. And so there are lots of kids in pain, and they're all in the same boat with everything that you said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I can see, they all have all of these things. So what's the difference between, the person that does pick up the gun and those that don't? I mean, how can we help our audience more understand uh, what part they can play? I mean, we have a lot of educators that are listening. We also have a lot of parents that are concerned about their children's safety in school. Of course, educators are as well. So, how can we identify a potential threat, and what can we do to help them?
I mean, I wish I had all the answers. I truly do. I remember exactly what I was wearing and what I was doing when we were in the middle of Nicholas Cruz's case and we heard about Uvalde. Kate had texted me. I had been in a doctor's appointment with my son, and so I had my phone off. And she texted me and said, because I was going to meet her afterwards, and she said, I can't be alone right now with everything that happened. I'm just going to go out with another team member to grab food. And I was like, what is she talking about? And then when it popped up, I just remember feeling like the earth fell out from under me, because you take pause before you take on a case like Nicholas Cruz, because of the enormity of it and how you might feel as a parent, for the incredible loss that these people have had. So you
Well,
don't just take it lightly.
say, yeah, exactly. Let me just say the Uvalde shooting that you're referring to was one that happened almost 10 years after the Sandy Hook school shooting, which is still the worst mass shooting in an elementary school in the US. This was 19 children and 2 adults that were killed at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas on May 24th, 2022. I just wanted, for those who are listening, so they have
Yes.
the proper reference. And that happened while you all were working on the Parkland shooters trial. And so, yeah, that was a devastating day.
It just, the whole goal of taking on a case like Nicholas Cruz's is whatever we could find out about the only living mass school shooter. If we could bring that information forward, that maybe it would help
The only living?
at that time when he had done this. And so to have it happen before you've been able to master that information and present it it's a gut punch, beyond the enormity of hearing about elementary school children. You just think, gosh, and I would love to say that fetal alcohol spectrum disorder was causational. Obviously, it's contributing, but it's not causational, because there's loads of people out there that have this diagnosis and they don't do this. So this is, I think, a more complicated answer than a one-off. But
it is complicated, just like the Sandy Hook school shooter was on the spectrum. And there are tons of people on the spectrum that aren't violent. So it is complicated. But I will say, when the shooting at Robb Elementary School happened 10 years later, I was out there saying, hey, what we're doing isn't working. And focusing on the attack end of the pathway to violence, that means just the hardening and lockdowns and all of this. Clearly, it's not enough. We need to start addressing the grievance and giving kids the skills and tools they need to manage that pain, because there is a possibility that you could grow through that pain when you have that awareness and the skills and tools. But that was a devastating day for me, because the police response was backwards. And that shouldn't have happened. It didn't have to happen. But then again, I say that about all school shootings. I say that 100% of school shootings are preventable. Do you agree with that?
I think certainly. I think part of the problem is, as Americans, we're not a preventative kind of folk culturally.
Right.
we wait till we have a headache and we take an aspirin. I mean, we keep talking about we should meditate, we should do these things. That's kind of more of an Eastern philosophy. And so I think when we look at school shootings, it's the same thing. We're practicing the lockdowns, albeit I understand why, but we're not looking at what is getting these individuals into this mode. And frankly, I remember I worked 1 year as a school psychologist in Virginia eons ago, and I was the only one for this very small public school system, and I went between 3 schools. Well, in larger cities, their school psychologists are overwhelmed just to do an evaluation to determine if somebody needs, they meet the criteria for a learning disability and they need assistance. You can wait a calendar year or more. So I think when we don't have enough individuals that are qualified, that can look and see, these students that are perhaps quiet, not communicative, it's, I think, where we're missing things.
Can I add to what you just said?
Sure.
The National Association of School Psychologists, NASP, recommends a student to school psychologist ratio of 500 students per every school psychologist. However, the national average is 1,119 to 1. So as you said, I mean, that's the reality of it right now. And so as you said, you were 1 for 3 schools. I see that a lot, a floating school psychologist that goes from school to school. And so, as you said, you need an evaluation. You can wait a year for that. And that's, it says some states are approaching 5,000 to 1, 5,000 students to 1 school psychologist. And I will say that I did have a meeting with the Department of Education, and I was meeting with a person that was in charge of elementary and secondary education. And they said their goal, and this was, maybe 5 years ago, was to put a school psychologist in every building. However, unfortunately, there aren't enough school psychologists in order to do that. Yes. That is, they're not even starting kindergarten right now and coming up to be enough school psychologists. So that's not the answer. I mean, it would be great to have more, but that's not the answer either, because it's not possible right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I feel like it's kind of like you go with what's on fire.
Yeah. Putting out the fires. That's exactly right. And that's how our society deals with drugs, with mental illness, with all of these escalating issues. We are always a step behind. We're learning from mistakes, and that includes school shootings as well.
It's so overwhelming to look at some of the sheer number of students in these schools. And, what we ask our teachers to do and what we ask our administration to do is phenomenal. And, it's exhausting and it's thankless. You've got teachers that are working till midnight, scoring tests. You've got policies in place that if their kids don't hit a certain threshold, their job could be in jeopardy, their raise could be in jeopardy. So asking those individuals to then monitor the mental health of the children in their room is asking a lot.
Don't they have to do that for their own safety?
I would imagine, yeah, they do. When they have a concern, they report it. The school counselor at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, when Nicholas Cruz was there, reported that he needed to be Baker acted to the law enforcement individual that worked at the school. Law enforcement individual met with him and said he disagreed and he was never Baker acted. And I'm not saying that would have solved the problems, but there was somebody who stepped up and said, this kid is not okay. and he needs something.
Yeah.
And it was stymied. And I don't know why it was stymied. I just know that it, again, it's like cheating, right? Because I have all these records and you go back and hindsight's 2020 and you go back and you try not to be judgmental because it's not fair, right? Each person only had a slice of the pie. We have the ability to look at everything and then look for where there's weaknesses. I mean, law enforcement was called to his home over 30 times between him and his brother. There was not one arrest made. There's not one Baker Act, which is a psychiatric involuntary hospitalization. So, and again, you could say, oh, well, shame on you, police. But I don't know each individual time. It was different officers. It was different situations, scenarios. You have Nick's adoptive mom saying, no, don't take him. So there's a lot of things at play. But you just go, oh my gosh, when someone does step forward and try, like that counselor,
Yes.
they're not being heard. So I definitely think more support for school staff. And again, I don't know where that would come from financially or what that would look like.
Yeah.
I just know what we've got going on, as you're saying, it's not working.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just interviewed somebody who he's been arrested as an adult for something, but when I go back and look at school records and I talk to him, he cannot read. He got promoted. He can't read. And
he's in school. What grade is he?
Not anymore. He dropped out very early. And, again, given the sheer numbers and the system being overwhelmed, I understand how it comes to be. But what he internalized is that he wasn't worthy and that he's stupid. He's actually not stupid. He likely has a dyslexia or another learning disability. It's just the internalization becomes ownership for the struggle. And unless you have an adult saying no, and when I looked at him, I said, you're not being able to read is not your fault. You being continually passed without an evaluation to provide the accommodations to help you read, that's the problem. And he just looked surprised. He just assumed he was too stupid to learn how to read, and he left school in like 6th grade.
Yeah, I mean, that's what most kids are going to do. If there's a problem, they're going to internalize it and blame themselves because the alternative is too scary to think that the adults in their life are incapable of protecting them and don't have their best interests at heart. That's too scary. So they will internalize it and blame themselves. And that's a problem for sure.
Well, it's also a little bit about control. When we blame ourselves, we give ourselves a false sense of control over a situation that's out of our control. It makes us feel empowered a bit in a very weird way. For instance, if you have a girlfriend come up to you and she tells you she was sexually assaulted, and you say, well, okay, well, tell me what happened, and I'm so sorry. And then she starts saying, well, I was wearing this skirt. On a cognitive level, we all know that what you wear does not give somebody else the right to violate your boundary. But it's our way or her way of being able to control it so it doesn't happen again. So when you take ownership of something, it's your way of trying to say, if I'm at fault, I can fix that. I can change that. Yeah, if it's out of my control, that's a huge anxiety laden thought, right? Like this thing that happened, if it's out of my control and I have no control over it, then how do I feel better? How do I go on? How do I feel comfortable? So when you have a child that's suffering, they tend to internalize blame because then they think that there's something they can do about it.
That's interesting. And so they blame themselves, and then that results in lack of self-worth and esteem.
It's almost like a backwards defense mechanism. If something's my fault, then I have the power and control to make sure that I do it differently or better the next time. But also, like you said, when you're a kid, you're internalizing blame and you're internalizing responsibility, and it's going to really hit your self-esteem and your self-worth and that value.
Wow, I think that's, first of all, I resonate with that because I do a lot of times I take responsibility for everything that happens, and I do feel like in doing that it gives me the power to fix it.
Mm.
So part of that, like I'm going, whoa, I'm writing it down because I'm trying to understand it, because that's how I operate. And but I get, like, as an adult it's different than if it's a child, because they really don't have the skills and tools or even the control to fix that situation.
Correct. And
Yeah.
if you look at a child that's like, let's say they're living in a home where there's abuse, or they're witnessing domestic violence, or they're witnessing drug abuse, they cannot leave that environment. If they run away, we bring them back.
Yeah.
If they are the ones acting out because they're now depressed or angry or anxious, we put them in treatment. And then they go back to that same environment that can be contributory or causational. So if we take over that, to allay our own anxiety, we say, okay, we take ownership of something that perhaps is not ours. It gives us a false sense of control. Unfortunately for them, it can be very weighted and heavy because they don't have the ability to change their environment while they're coming to this understanding or this thought that they're at fault for something.
And how awful, because they love their parents even though their parents are inadequate to keep them safe. They want to be with them because it's what they know. And
Yes,
it's scary what they don't. And even, I mean, and it could potentially be a worse situation if you're put in a home that you don't know what you're going to get.
it's what we ask of our children today is so much more. It's different, right? Like I had a part-time job by the time I was 15, and that's probably not going to happen for my kids. But the level of academic stress, we don't just play baseball anymore. We do travel baseball. Everything's so much more intense, and there is a lot of pressure. And when you're young and you see the adults in your world not understanding or knowing how to handle pressure, then how are you going to learn how to handle it? And then you're under this intense amount. There's just a lot of difficulty and exposure to things that kids have now. If they want to look at pornography, they get on the internet.
Right.
If they want to, communicate with somebody in a foreign country about an inappropriate topic, they get on the internet.
Right. Right.
And it's overwhelming as a parent to have to regulate that, even if you're doing your best job ever. They're savvier with this stuff than we are. Um, and yet, again, they don't have a lot of the outlets that we had. If you needed something, you had to leave your house to get it. If you wanted ice cream, you couldn't order it and have it delivered. If you wanted, something to eat, if you wanted something from the store, if you needed supplies for school, you had to go to Target, you had to go to Walmart, you had to go Kmart. I'm aging myself now. You had to go outside of your home and get that. You did not have the luxury of having it overnighted by Amazon and not leaving and not engaging and not picking up the different social skills that the rest of us have had to pick up.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different set of rules, but with, in my opinion, a lot more pressure and a lot less outlet.
The US Surgeon General came out with a report recently. It's called Parents Under Pressure. And they found that 41% of parents are so stressed out that they can't participate on a daily basis, that they can't function. And what that says for our kids, as you were saying, that the modeling, if they're not seeing it from their parents, um, you know, hopefully they're seeing it from their educators in school, because how else are they going to learn? And then they have this kind of, I have been calling this, I'm holding up my phone right now, a crack pipe. because,
I know.
a lot of the apps on here have been created with the use of dopamine labs. So they are literally targeting your dopamine receptors, which are the same things that, gambling and porn and drugs and alcohol work from. And so this is, and people will say, oh, but it's good. It connects people on Facebook and things like that. I honestly think there's more harm that's coming from this crack pipe that we all carry around now and that we have our faces in instead of conversing. I just sat at breakfast with a mom and her daughter, and they were both on their different devices and they barely said a word to each other. And I thought, how sad. But in the little time that we have left, Heather, I'd like to leave on, a more positive, maybe action oriented note about what your thoughts are on what maybe the audience can do and what you think the solution is. How do we move forward from this? I mean, clearly nobody wants to live in a world that is dangerous. That
I know.
parents are sending their kids to school with the thought in their brain that it might be the last time they ever see them. Kids are sitting down in class and looking for where the exit is. And I just wonder, how do we shift from this, in your opinion? And, what can we do?
So I will say, on a positive note, some of the biggest moments of grace that I've experienced in my life have come from sitting down and talking to somebody who's incarcerated. Some of my most incredible life lessons I have gotten from individuals.
Oh,
Not that from him, that's for sure. But I've gotten it.
Hey, obviously.
I'm so sorry. If I lock him in the door, he scratches, and then I have a hole in my door. Some of the best moments of learning, some of the largest moments of grace have come from somebody who, first of all, didn't know they were giving it. And second of all, you don't expect it. So I think there are times when you can see that one child that is giving you such grief. If you're an administrator, if you are a teacher, and by saying something positive or asking something positive from that person, sometimes it just opens up a dialogue, and other times it just opens up a realization that they're seen, even if they don't react well to it. There are individuals that I will see for an appeal. They've been in prison for multitudes of years, and I'm the first person they've ever told that they were sexually molested. Sometimes just sitting there with somebody, saying nothing, letting them cry, letting them be who they need to be in that moment, and just saying, I'm sorry that happened. That should never have happened. And, maybe the person, their case doesn't go well, but I hope that they take from it that in a few moments they were seen. And if you have a child that's acting out,
Paired. Yeah.
a lot of times children don't have the ability to say, I'm feeling blue today. My mood is low. They don't have that vocabulary. So they feel negative and then they act out. And a lot of this is, we overdiagnose ADHD. A lot of it, in my opinion, or some of it, is childhood depression. They present extremely similarly. Can't pay attention, can't concentrate, acting out, mouthing off, impulsive, not thinking, a lot of that. Decreased appetite, increased appetite, problems with sleep, a lot of that is it symptom overlap. And I've seen kids at a young age be put on a stimulant medication when they were just depressed. So, again, it's asking more of our teachers and administrators, and I hate to be the person to do that because they really should have double their salary.
I totally agree.
Oh my gosh, it's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have the most important job in the entire world, and they
know.
get paid accordingly, 100%.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. I mean, that's where kids spend. They spend more of their waking hours with teachers than they do with their parents.
And that's our gold. That's our gold, more valuable than the gold that we have in any vault. And that's safe. the gold, the medal is safe, but our kids aren't. It's like mind boggling. It's so ridiculous. And that is really important point that you made, Heather. The misdiagnoses of mental illness. I had a podcast with Jeff Schultz, who runs a center called Neurovation, actually in Sandy Hook. And he does neurofeedback. And he said
Oh, yeah.
that the majority of kids that walk through his door have been misdiagnosed. And he knows this by a simple QEEG that he does of the
Yes.
brain. And so he's therefore able to take them off of these heavy duty meds with big side effects. I think this
Yes.
has to be something that if you're a parent and your kid has been diagnosed with anything, go to the place that offers neurofeedback, get your child a QEEG. It's a 20-minute test with a cap on his head, and it looks at which parts of the brain are performing and not. You can either validate or not the diagnosis that your child has, but don't just go into a therapist and I mean, the way that we diagnose is through symptom clusters. There's not a blood test. They literally just go, oh, you're tired. Oh, you exhibit this symptom. Let me see. Okay, you have ADHD. And you know what? It could be something else. And by looking at the brain, and by the way, these tests are covered by insurance. They're not too terribly expensive, and they're vital for proper diagnoses and to make sure that your child is not on heavy duty medication that can have life altering consequences. Somebody put me off that trail in the very beginning. They said school shooters have nothing to do with the meds that they're on, so don't even go down that path. It was kind of like nothing to see here. And I find out, from speaking with experts that that's definitely not the case. And so, I really want to start talking about that as well.
It is. It's hard. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. And if you don't need a psychostimulant, or if you need one, you shouldn't take it. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's just when somebody's acting out in school, the go-to knee-jerk reaction is ADHD, and the medication for that is legalized speed. And if I gave it to the orange and white cat, he would pay attention and lock in on, when I put birds on the TV or something, like he'd be riveted. So because you respond to the medication by being more rapt and more focused doesn't mean that you have the disorder. Mm-hmm. So, it's just, we look at children who are acting out because that's their way of communicating, right? Like a lot of adults don't have the ability to name feelings and talk about them. So
in fact, the majority of adults out of 2,000 labels for emotions can only name 3. That was something that was research that Brene Brown did. Happy, mad, sad. So how else do you get that out? Well, behavior, and adults, the exact same as children.
We just have less rigidity imposed on us than children have. Mm-hmm. We can go out to a bar and have a cocktail. We can go for a walk without telling anybody. We can drive ourselves to a restaurant and indulge in our favorite dessert. Children can't do that. Mm-hmm. They're rigidly expected to sit for 8 hours of a day, riveted and paying attention. And if their entire world at home or internally is falling apart, that's going to suffer. So they don't have as many outlets. So they tend to act out. And it's sad. And I know it's hard because you're asking a teacher to dig deep to that one child that makes your life miserable. And I know this is super unpopular and I'm so sorry. But if there is a petition to double the salary, I'm happy to sign it twice. So,
you know what? Me too. And you know what? I think that what you said previously about your experience in prisons and the biggest moments of grace that you've experienced in your life have been with those residents or inmates and in totally unexpected ways. I think that, if we began to look at these kids, and the hard ones, the ones that are the hardest to give love to, the ones that are even, make themselves look a little scary and the behavior is definitely off the wall. If we could be present with those kids, if we could, as Aaron Stark says, give love to those we feel deserve it the least, we might be setting ourselves up for moments of grace. And I got to tell you as well, I speak to a lot of at-risk kids, and those are my favorite moments. Those small
Yes.
moments of unexpected beauty in the connection, in the sharing of a heart space, in the trust that is gifted you because you're there and you're willing to listen. It is such a huge privilege and honor to have that. And I think maybe if we set those interactions up with that intention, that it could be one of the most beautiful things that has ever happened to you in your life. And at the same time, you're giving love and serving, you're also receiving that as well. Then it might make it a little bit more attractive and possible, because I do think, and I don't think that there's any way around it, I think that these kids are suffering, and I think that that results in this kind of exterior that is very off-putting, and that they're going to trigger you, and they know they're going to be the ones that are the hardest to love, as Erin says, but the ones most craving that love, and that if you are willing to put in the time, you will also receive the benefit.
That is 100%. When you have a kid that's acting out in class, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. They don't feel good about themselves.
Right.
And if they can get you to validate that they're not good, it's attention and it's validating to them what they already feel. And so that's what they pull for. It isn't about the teacher. It's not about the administration. It's about how poorly they feel about them. And I think maybe it would be helpful, but I'm thinking of one particular moment when I was sitting with an inmate, and it was the night before he was going back to court for a resentencing, and he had been in prison for decades. And this resentencing would determine whether or not he dies in prison or he has the opportunity to get out. So I had finished testing, and I looked at him and I said, well, do you have any questions about tomorrow? Because this is very anxiety, inducing for them the night before, right? And he looked at me and said, yes. How do you do this? And I thought he meant, how does he do court, right? And I said, how do you do what? He said, no, how do you come into prisons? The lawyer said, you've been doing this for 20 years. I'm a man and I live here and deserve to be here, and this is hard for me. How do you as a woman come in and out of prisons? Like, what do you do to take care of you? Like, I jog. And all I could think was, the moment that he should be absolutely focused on his own nerves, his own outcomes, and he was dead serious. He was confused as to how I could handle such a difficult environment. And what did I do to take care of myself? And in that moment, I felt just almost so taken aback, because it was a moment when I had toddlers, I had all sorts of just very difficult, I was taking care of an elderly grandparent. There was so much going on that was draining, and I was exhausted. And here's somebody who knows nothing about me, was genuinely curious on a day that he should be so focused on himself as to how I was doing. And that says something about him as a person. And so there are times, and it also made me check myself moving forward. I do need to take care of myself, because I'm really not doing it. So there are, I think, again, we're going to be challenged with looking at individuals that have done terrible things, be it children acting up or inmates who've committed crimes. And it's about trying to let them know that you're willing to see them. And I thanked him for asking. So, I wasn't going to have a personal discussion about my exercise habits or my personal overwhelmed situation, right, but I did thank him for asking, because I felt like he puts himself on a limb in a way by doing that.
That's that moment of grace that you were talking about. That's an example of that, right?
100%. And if you look at a child and you say to them, today's been a tough day. I hope for you, your day gets better
Yeah.
because you deserve to have a decent day.
Yeah.
And then you walk out the back door and you, because I know it's hard.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a beautiful conversation, Heather. We actually met in person in
Mhm.
Miami in a prison, in a sort of, it was not really a halfway house because what would you call that
I
kind of?
guess it's a reentry facility because they do
Okay.
come and go with work. Mhm.
Right. So a reentry facility where Choose Love was being taught, and there was a graduation. And so you came to watch that. And I just would love to get your reaction about what you saw and also your thoughts on what we're doing at Choose Love, teaching, giving kids the essential life skills and adults, by the way, that they need to learn and grow through adversity rather than being taken down by it and taking down others as well. So I'm just curious about what your thoughts were during that graduation, and then what your thoughts are with how we're working on the proactive prevention side of not only violence but substance abuse, mental illness, and other
Sure.
diseases of despair.
Well, I have to say that was a phenomenal experience to watch this. I mean, I was blown out of the water. And Kate said, she goes, when you meet Scarlett, you'll understand. And I was like, okay. And then I met Scarlett and I understood. I was like, oh my gosh. I think what I could do is because I was watching you speak and watching the gentlemen that are in this program who are getting ready to EOS or come out of their prison sentence and watching them respond to you. And I mean, I worked in prison. I've seen programs in prison. I've run sex offender treatment groups, other groups in prison. They were riveted. And there was the leader, the facilitator of this group, another prisoner. And one of the things he said is that if Scarlett Lewis can forgive the young man that took the ultimate thing from her, and that is her child, then everybody in here can forgive themselves. And I think that, again, if you compare that to a child in a classroom that blames themselves for whatever's going on in their life, be it their own reading disability, be it their own chaos at home, be it their own difficult financial situation, whatever that is, if they can forgive themselves for being in the situation they're in or for some of the ways that they act out, then that's the lesson. Because that's where people get in trouble when they're coming out of prison, is they think, they get smacked down a lot. They can't get a job. They can't qualify for a credit card. They can't find someone to take their driver's test. Like there's all these impediments that are very difficult. And so then they start saying, it's me. I don't have value. I have nothing to contribute. So watching that man make that statement and watching those men lock in with you, that was the gift for me to see that. This has phenomenal value because it teaches them, they kind of, and a lot of times you're not going to get forgiveness from your victim, particularly with homicide. I mean, it's so hard. But if you can see someone like you let go, then you're able to perhaps forgive yourself a bit. And that buys somebody less self-flagellation, maybe some lesser level of depression. And it lets them have some small form of acceptance of themselves. And that means the world when they move on, because it means they no longer fully internalize responsibility for all the bad things, right? Because these are men that are coming off a sentence. They've served their time. But the board is not erased, nor do they start over, because they're starting with a felony conviction and they're starting with, life experience, depending upon when they went in. So watching them respond to you was really just so eye-opening. And I think moving forward, the power that you bring is one of, and frankly, I don't know if I could do this. Like I told Kate, I said, I don't know that I could get to where Scarlett is if somebody did this to my child. I don't know that I could be that person, and I hope I never find out. But when people see that that you're choosing it. If you can choose it after what has happened in your life, it gives them the thought that they too might be able to choose it moving forward. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful lesson. We talk all the time about redemption, but it's really hard for us to give it to each other and to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And self-forgiveness is not, I mean, it's taking responsibility
100%.
and learning and growing and being strengthened, and then letting go of the weight of the pain so that you can be the highest and best version of yourself. What God put you on earth to be, that's where we all want to get to. And we can't get there if we're, as you say, self-flagellating ourselves, if we don't, we have low self-esteem, we don't feel worthy, all these things will be holding us back. And actually the interesting thing is we can teach this to kids. And so, like in the beginning, I was saying, as you were listing all these reasons for why kids do this, we can teach how to learn and grow through each of these things, and, teach that you're not alone in this, and how to have healthy relationships, how to make responsible decisions, how to choose and ultimately love in any situation, which is always the strongest. And so I think it's so important. That's why I've dedicated my life to it. I appreciate you, Heather, for spending time with me.
No, the pleasure is absolutely mine.
It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let it in. Let the healing